Okay. Buenas tardes, Toro. Um, Welcome to Storytime with Srta Pikula. I hope that you are doing well. Thanks for tuning in, whether it's now or later or whenever. Um, and I'm going to give a shout out today to. Um, oh man, I don't even know who to choose to give a shout out to today because everyone is just. This class all of you students out there, and then you guys are fantastic. All of you parents out there of these students, you have great kids. They are all so different and have such different energy, and they really bring out good things about each other. And they're so fun. I know I've said that before, but it's worth repeating. They're fun and they're bright and they try, and it's cool to see where they've gone this year. It's cool to see this to my students where all of you have gone this year and how you've grown. We're going to recap on Prince Caspian a little bit. Not Prince Caspian. I'm so used to saying Prince Caspian. We're in Voyage of the Dawn Treader. So they were setting out to sea again, and there was a crazy storm. They were being tossed about. Everything was being flooded. The mast broke. Like everything was crazy. And then we got to Eustace's journal, and we have a couple more entries he's been writing for the last couple days, and he is just saying that everything's going wrong and they won't listen to him and they're all fools, and he kind of exaggerates a lot too and isn't always really writing the truth. And so Eustace is kind of a sulky negative boy, but we're gonna keep going and see what happens. All right, so and he says everything's Caspian's fault. Okay, let's see. Where were we? I think we last read September 6th, so that there were 3 different letters, and now we're going to read September 7th. So continue reading what Caspian, or not what Caspian, what Eustace is writing. September 7th. A little wind today, but still from the west. Oh, that's another thing. So they're rationing, right? They lost water and they're rationing food and water, and it's looking very grim for them. September 7th. A little wind today, but still from the west. Made a few miles eastward, with part of the sail set on what Drinian calls the jury mast. That means the bowsprit set upright and tied. They called it lashed to the stump of the real mast. Still terribly thirsty. September 8th. Still sailing east. I stay in my bunk all day now and see no one except Lucy till the 2 fiends come to bed. Lucy gives me a little of her water ration. She says girls don't get as thirsty as boys. I had often thought this, but it ought to be more generally known while people are at sea. September 9th. Land in sight. A very high mountain a long way off to the southeast. September 10th. The mountain is bigger and clearer, but still a long way off. Gulls again today, for the first time since I don't know how long. September 11th. Caught some fish and had them for dinner. Dropped anchor at about 7 p.m. in 3 fathoms of water in a bay of this mountainous island. That idiot Caspian wouldn't let us go ashore because it was getting dark and he was afraid of savages and wild beasts. Extra water ration tonight. What awaited them on this island was going to concern Eustace more than anyone else. But it cannot be told in his words because after September 11th, he forgot about keeping his diary for a very long time. When the morning came with a low gray sky but very hot, the adventurers found they were in a bay encircled by such cliffs and crags that it was like a Norwegian fjord. I think that's how you say that. In front of them, at the head of the bay, there was some level land heavily overgrown with trees that appeared to be cedars, through which a rapid stream came out. Beyond that was a steep ascent ending in a jagged ridge, and behind that a vague darkness of mountains which ran into dull colored clouds so that you could not see their tops. The nearer cliffs at each side of the bay were streaked here and there with lines of white, which everyone knew to be waterfalls, though at the distance they did not show any movement or make any noise. Indeed, the whole place was very silent, and the water of the bay was smooth as glass. It reflected every detail of the cliffs. The scene would have been pretty in a picture, but was rather oppressive in real life. It was not a country that welcomed visitors. The whole ship's company went ashore in two boatloads, and everyone drank and washed deliciously in the river and had a meal and a rest before Caspian set four men back to keep the ship. And the day's work began. Here was everything to be done. The casks must be brought ashore and the faulty ones mended if possible, and all refilled. A tree, a pine if they could get it, must be felled, meaning cut down, and made into a new mast. Sails must be repaired, a hunting party organized to shoot any game the land might yield, clothes to be washed and mended, and countless small breakages on board to be set right. For the Dawn Treader herself, and this was more obvious now than they had seen than they saw at her at a distance, could hardly be recognized as the same gallant ship which had left Narrowhaven. She looked like a crippled, discolored hulk anyone might have taken for a wreck. And her officers and crew were no better. Lean, pale, red eyed from lack of sleep, and dressed in rags. As Eustace lay under a tree and heard all these plans being discussed, his heart sank. Was there going to be no rest? It looked as if their first day on the longed for land was going to be quite as hard work as a day at sea. Then a delightful idea occurred to him. Nobody was looking. They were all chattering about their ship as if they were actually, as if they actually liked the beastly thing. Why shouldn't he simply slip away? He would take a stroll inland, find a cool, airy place up in the mountains, have a good long sleep, and not rejoin the others till all the day's work was over. He felt it would do him good, but he would take great care to keep the bay and the ship in sight so as to be sure of his way back. He wouldn't like to be left behind in this country all alone. He at once put his plan into action. He rose quietly from his place and walked away among the trees, taking care to go slowly and in an aimless manner so that anyone who saw him would think he was merely stretching his legs. He was surprised to find how quickly the noise of the conversation died away behind him, and how very silent and warm and dark green the wood became. Soon he felt he could venture on a quicker and more determined stride. This soon brought him out of the wood. The ground began sloping steeply up in front of him. The grass was dry and slippery, but manageable if he used his hands as well as his feet. And though he panted and mopped his forehead a good deal, he plugged away steadily. This showed, by the way, that his new life, little as he suspected it, had already done him some good. The old Eustace, Harold and Alberta's Eustace, would have given up the climb after about 10 minutes. Slowly, and with several rests, he reached the ridge. Here he had expected to have a view into the heart of the island, but the clouds had now come lower and nearer, and the sea of fog was rolling to meet him. He sat down and looked back. He was now so high that the bay looked small beneath him, and miles of sea were visible. Then the fog from the mountains closed in all around him, thick but not cold, and he lay down and turned this way and that, to find the most comfortable position to enjoy himself. But he didn't enjoy himself, or not for very long. He began almost for the first time in his life to feel lonely. At first, this feeling grew very gradually, and then he began to worry about the time. There was not the slightest sound. Suddenly, it occurred to him that he might have been lying there for hours. Perhaps the others had gone. Perhaps they had let him wander away on purpose and simply in order to leave him behind because no one wanted him there. Eustace leapt up in a panic and began to descend. At first, he tried to do it too quickly, slipped on the steep grass, and slid several feet. Then he thought then he thought that this had carried him too far to the left. And as he came up, he had seen precipices on that side. So he clambered up again as near as he could to the place he had started from and began the descent another time, bearing to his right. After that, things seemed to be going better. He went very cautiously, for he could not see more than a yard ahead, and there was still perfect silence all around him. It is very unpleasant to have to go cautiously when there is a voice inside you saying all the time, hurry, hurry, hurry. For every moment, the terrible idea of being left behind grew stronger. If he had understood Caspian and the Pevensies at all, he would have known, of course, that there was not the least chance of their doing any such thing to him. But he had persuaded himself they were all his enemies in human form. Um, in human form. At last, said Eustace, as he came slithering down a slide of loose stones, scree they call it, and found himself on the level. And now, where are those trees? There is something dark ahead. Why, I do believe the fog is clearing. It was. The light increased every moment and made him blink. The fog lifted. He was in an utterly unknown valley, and the sea was nowhere in sight. Chapter 6. The Adventures of Eustace. At that very moment, the others were washing hands and face in the river and generally getting ready for dinner and rest. The three best archers had gone up into the hills north of the bay and returned laden with a pair of wild goats which were now roasting over a fire. Caspian had ordered a cask of wine ashore, strong wine from Archenland, which had to be mixed with water before you drink it, so there would be plenty for all. The work had gone well so far, and it was a merry meal. Only after the second helping of goat did Edmund say, "Where is that blighter, Eustace?" Meanwhile, Eustace stared round the unknown valley. It was so narrow and deep, and the cliffs which surrounded it so sheer that it was like a huge pit or trench. The floor was grassy, though strewn with rocks, and here and there Eustace saw black burnt patches like those you see on the sides of the railway embankment in a dry summer. About 15 yards away from him was a pool of clear, smooth water. There was at first nothing else at all in the valley, not an animal, not a bird, not an insect. The sun beat down, and grim peaks and horns of mountains peered over the valley's edge. Eustace realized, of course, that in the fog he had come down the wrong side of the ridge, so he turned at once to see about getting back. But as soon as he had looked, he shuddered. Apparently, he had, by amazing luck, found the only possible way down, a long green spit of land, horribly steep and narrow, with cliff on either side. There was no other way possible. There was no other possible way of getting back. But could he do it now? But could he do it now that he saw what it was really like? His head swam at the very thought of it. He turned around again, thinking that at any rate he'd better have a good drink from the pool first. But as soon as he had turned, and before he had taken a step forward into the valley, he heard a noise behind him. It was only a small noise, but it sounded loud in the immense silence. It froze him dead still where he stood for a second. Then he slew around his neck and looked. At the bottom of the cliff, a little to his left hand, was a low, dark hole, the entrance to a cave perhaps. And out of them, two thin wisps of smoke were coming. And the loose stones just beneath the dark hollow were moving. That was the noise he had heard, just as if something were crawling in the dark behind them. Something was crawling. Worse, something was coming out. Edmund or Lucy or you would have recognized it at once, but Eustace had read none of the right books. The thing that came out of the cave was something he had never imagined. A long lead-colored snout, dull red eyes, no feathers or fur, a long lithe body that trailed on the ground, legs whose elbows went up higher than its back like a spider's, cruel claws, bat's wings that made a rasping noise on the stone, yards of tail. and the lines of smoke were coming from its two nostrils. He never said the word dragon to himself, nor would it have made things any better if he had. But perhaps if he had known something about dragons, he would have been a little surprised at this dragon's behavior. It did not sit up and clap its wings, nor did it shoot out a stream of flame from its mouth. The smoke from its nostrils was like the smoke of a fire that will not last much longer. Nor did it seem to have noticed Eustace. It moved very slowly towards the pool, slowly and with many pauses. Even in his fear, Eustace felt that it was an old, sad creature. He wondered if he dared make a dash for the scent, but it might look round if he had made any noise. It might come more to life. Perhaps it was only shamming. Anyway, was the use of trying to escape by climbing from a creature that could fly? It had reached the pool and slid its horrible scaly chin down over the gravel to drink. But before it had drunk, there came up from it a great choking, no, a great croaking or clanging cry, and after a few twitches and convulsions, it rolled round on its side and lay perfectly still with one claw in the air. A little dark blood gushed from its wide open mouth. The smoke from its nostrils turned black for a moment and then floated away. No more came. For a long time, Eustace did not dare move. Perhaps this was the brute's trick, the way that it lured travelers into their doom. But no, but one couldn't wait forever. He took a step nearer, then two steps, then halted again. The dragon remained motionless. He noticed too that the red fire had gone out of its eyes. At last he came up to it. He was quite sure now that it was dead. With a shudder he touched it. Nothing happened. The relief was so great that Eustace almost laughed out loud. He began to feel as if he had fought and killed the dragon instead of merely seeing it die. He stepped over it and went to the pool for his drink, for the heat was getting unbearable. He was not surprised when he heard a peal of thunder. Almost immediately afterwards, the sun disappeared, and before he had finished his drink, big drops of rain were falling. The climate of this island was a very unpleasant one. In less than a minute, Eustace was wet to the skin and half blind with such rain as one never sees in Europe. There was no use trying to climb out of the valley as long as this lasted. He bolted for the only shelter in sight, the dragon's cave. There he lay down and tried to catch his breath. And that's where we're going to end for today. So Eustace found the dragon. And we're going to see what happens next time. So thanks for watching, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time.